Welcome to the Neurodiverse Lens, a CDL podcast featuring Carolyn and Jordan.
Welcome back to the Neurodiverse Lens, a CDL podcast. It is week 4 of our symposium. We are still alive. We made it, Jordan. Last week was amazing. I really felt strongly about including a week on celebration, and Olivia's workshop really just embodied that message.
Yeah, we got to take a little bit of a break. We didn't have 3 sessions last week. We had our community call on the Wednesday, and then Thursday was Olivia's session, who is our social emotional program manager here at CDL. And her session was all about celebrating neurodiverse brilliance, strengths that power our community.
It was the perfect addition to the things we've been talking about, and really shifting that focus to, yes, we need to understand. Yes, we need to learn and understand the ways that neurodiverse individuals learn, but we also need to celebrate. But that being said, this week is really important because this is the week where we take everything we've learned and we move forward. So this conference is standing together, but this week is about us moving together.
Yeah.
We need to advocate. Our vision is a world where neurodiverse individuals feel included, empowered, and celebrated. But we can't do that alone. The truth is, we still live in a neurotypical world. There is still stigma, marginalization, and shame. There is still a shocking lack of resources for neurodiverse children. And I say shocking.
Yeah.
I think people who do not have a neurodiverse individual in their life that they know about, because everybody does have neurodiverse individuals in their lives. If you don't have a child who's currently going through the school system, you may not understand how there is a lack of resources. At CDL, we are an apolitical organization. That's not our focus. Our focus is about changing the whole community to make sure that it is a priority that neurodiverse students get what they need in the classroom. In my presentation in the first week, I talked about the problems with modifying versus accommodating, and are we holding neurodiverse children back? Olivia talked about celebrating, but now we need to talk about creating a real community in our whole community where things are better for neurodiverse individuals.
Yeah, and I think the purpose really of our final episode of our symposium series, talking about advocacy, I really kind of want to talk about like what it actually means and what it can mean for a lot of different folks. You know, how advocacy doesn't have to be loud. It can kind of be gentle or subtle. How the support for neurodiverse folks in your life is, you know, just making sure their voices are heard and respected, whether that be in your friend group, in a work meeting, or maybe just out in public somewhere, or most importantly in your house. And yeah, how that's like the number one thing that you can do in terms of advocating for a neurodiverse person in your life. I don't know if you want to touch on advocating for yourself as a neurodiverse individual as well, maybe in those situations.
Yeah, I will say, unfortunately, the way things work right now is as the neurodiverse individual, you are going to have to advocate. You are going to have to say more. So one of the things that I am always having to advocate for is the need for processing time and the need to understand things ahead of time. I do not like surprises in my life at all. Yeah. I want to know what's going to happen. Even if it's like a good surprise, I don't like that. I want to know what's going to happen. So when I have meetings, sometimes I will have to say to the person, I'm not going to be able to show up to this meeting in the way you would like if you don't tell me what the meeting is about. And I have to advocate for that way. When we're talking about neurodiverse people advocating in the workforce, we have a podcast episode completely on this topic and how difficult and challenging it is. Right now, the onus is on neurodiverse individuals, but I'm hoping a little bit with this symposium to flip that script and to create more allies who maybe you don't need a meeting agenda for the meeting. Maybe you're neurotypical and you can just roll with that. But maybe you start asking for one so that the neurodiverse individual isn't always asking. Maybe when you're making plans with your friends, I would love we're hanging out till time.
Yeah.
That is perfect. I hate when people are at my house and it's like, well,
I'm going to bed.
I'm going to bed now.
Where are you going?
Bye. And that might not be something you need, right? But when we're talking about advocacy, it isn't just the picket signs on the picket line, angry, which is sometimes how people envision advocacy. It's in the small things. Like if you're in a group of friends and you're going to hang out, saying, okay, we're going to go to this restaurant and we're going to go here and we should be wrapped up around 8. Maybe you don't need that, but maybe one of your friends does. It also means that you listen to your friends' needs so that you can meet them in the future. Because sometimes you just don't know what people need, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked a lot about this in this symposium, especially in our Understanding Week, is that 2 neurodiverse people don't have the same needs necessarily. And so you need to be listening to the neurodiverse people in your life so you know how to advocate for them.
Yeah, and a big thing I kind of wanted to talk about was the term advocating with, not for. So, you know, maybe if you have someone who's a bit closer in your life, having those discussions with them on co-creating these goals or action items or plans or anything in advance so that, you know, when my family invites us to dinner last minute, like 30 minutes before, and just expects us to drop everything, I can say, hey, I need to talk to Mitch, who is my partner. Whereas before I used to just say, yep, and we're going. And then when he's upset and he's, you know, taken aback because, you know, I sprung these plans on him last minute, which rightfully so, he's totally entitled to feel that way. But yeah, like we had to sit down and we really had to have that conversation of like, okay, if, you know, we're invited somewhere, how last minute can it be? How much can it change your schedule? What does a good timeline of like expectations changing look for you? And I think that can be really like relayed on a lot of things, even when it comes to working, like changing a meeting time or, you know, changing a schedule of like, oh, you're working from home this day. Well, actually I need you in office that day kind of thing. And it's never going to be perfect, but I think if you can see the other person taking a genuine effort into the work, I think you're someone who maybe on the other side of that can really understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, 2 things on that. One thing, it's like one of the things we'll do about our work is if I need to change things. So if I say to someone, hey, do you mind? I will say not asking as your boss.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'll just send the message, not asking as your boss. Do you mind if we flip this around? So people can say no because obviously power dynamics exist. And 2, just kind of off-topic question. Has your relationship with Mitch improved as you've kind of gained understanding through the work you do in your day job?
Oh my God, totally. Like 1,000% yes. Like even just in the last year of kind of moving up into a leadership position where there's actually like people that I'm managing and kind of working through those conversations with them with, I feel like I've gained so many skills on how to navigate some difficult conversations in our relationship. And we've been together now almost 6 years. And it's like, it's kind of crazy to think about, but it's gotten a lot better. And now we're actually living with my parents, so it's gonna get a whole much more of a of a lot of difficult conversations. But yeah, it's been really good for our relationship. So
well, that's good.
Yeah.
And this is the key about advocacy, right? Is that if it was left just up to Mitch, the tension that would create in your relationship because he's constantly having to self-advocate, and now you're able to kind of be a buffer and do some of that advocacy before it even gets to him. And that's what we're trying to talk about, is making small changes in our life and the way that we interact with other people to create more spaces. And advocacy can also be just speaking up and being like, I don't think that includes everybody if we do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even going a step further, like if you are close with a coworker, even asking them privately, like what does support look like for them, and letting them know that you can be the one who says like, man, I don't think so. Like, so I think that's, and a lot of that may come with like with time, like building those relationships. But I think the more you kind of ingrain that process in your own mind, you're able to kind of ask those questions more candidly, even if you don't know someone specifically who might benefit from that change or that accommodation.
Yeah, surprise, surprise, I'm going to bring up universal design again. One of the things that's really important, I did a training yesterday, and one of the questions they asked me is, how do I support staff who require a certain level of micromanagement but hate micromanagement? And this is where we get the advocating with concept. I said, you need to talk to them. Together, come up with a plan of when you are going to check in with them. What is that going to look like, so that they have agency? And you might not get it right the first time, because that's an important part of advocacy, is it's not just asking for an accommodation, someone gets an accommodation and then that fixes everything. It's a constant process. And I said, probably the first time, what they think they want as an employee isn't necessarily what they need, and you're going to have to move and shake. But you need their voice as part of the process. It can't just be you deciding what works best for this person. I'm a big proponent of, we need to include children in an age-appropriate way more in the IEP conversations. Those are individual education plans. These are made for the children. And we know a lot of parents work hard to have their voice heard at these meetings. This is something we support with at CDL. Book a resource call if you need support with it. But what is missing is the student. Until they're 14, they don't have to be, and I can tell you, I've never had a child, even older teens, be a part of that IEP meeting. How are external people, even their parents, able to know what works best for them? The child needs to be a part of that conversation. There needs to be agency. We can't be providing support for people. We need to be providing support with people. And one of the things that has happened in our community is sometimes the voices of our allies ends up being louder than the voices of the neurodiverse individuals, and we need to make sure our advocacy is always centered on the neurodiverse individuals. There is a lot of privilege neurotypical people have when they do their advocacy, and sometimes their voices end up being louder than ours. One thing I always talk about, and I'm mindful, is the privilege that I have as an autistic person who communicates generally in a way that can be understood. I don't need an AAC device. Obviously, I'm not considered nonverbal. Probably the opposite of that if one existed. And there's a privilege in that. I sometimes am representing or speaking for a group of people who, unless people specifically take the time to listen to their concerns, may not be heard. And a lot of support that they may receive is on them. One of the things we as an organization make a conscious decision not to talk about is ABA. And I'm not going to talk about it today, but that is a method of therapy that is provided to autistic children. And there is some debate in the community from individuals who have now grown up and had ABA about their own feelings on it. As an organization, we have no opinion on it. We support parents and their right to make a decision. But we want to make sure when we're doing practices that it's for them. We also need to hear our children's voices. Sometimes they're going to say things we don't like. And I, as you know, am a big proponent of that child is a minor, make them come to programming. But there's ways that we can still hear their voice. Like, I hear that you don't want to go to programming. So I'm going to make sure that you have quiet time every Thursday night. I promise I won't book anything on Thursday nights if you go to programming on Mondays and Wednesdays. So it's not just completely giving into the child's voice, but we
Right.
still need to have the child's voice. And the best way we can teach them to advocate is start by having a process within our own home.
Yeah, and I think another point to kind of build off that is, I guess I wanted to talk about like everyday advocacy, and it's something that parents can do, educators can do, employees can do. Um, is just asking for small, simple things. I think a really big tool is to kind of start naming barriers when potentially others might not see them. I think a huge thing for me at CDL was, um, I had requested that we start recording meetings. I might not be great at always remembering to start the recording, but when I know it's an important virtual meeting, to kind of start that, and that way I can reflect on the transcript afterwards and kind of go through everything afterwards. Um, but even just, you know, after group meetings, I'll take my notes from the transcript and send that out to everyone. Or like let people know it's available if they want to look at it. Or even just the recordings for our parent workshops, sending out that recording and transcript out afterwards to all the attendees. Um, Even though no one has said really that they needed the transcript, but it's there if needed. Um, or kind of maybe challenging any assumptions in, workplaces, or, um, kind of going back to how you said in the basement, how it's either, like a desert down there or in the Arctic. Um, Asking for sensory adjustments as well. Um, Pointing out like, oh, it's really cold in here. Like, can we turn up the heat? Or, oh, it's really hot in here. Can we open a window? If you're saying and asking for these small things, then that neurodiverse person in the room or in that space might feel a bit more seen or understood, even though you're not kind of directly pointing them out, I should say.
Yeah, and it can be subtly calling in individuals who are doing things that are maybe harmful. Does your workplace have an accommodation process that would be difficult for a neurodiverse individual to navigate? If you're neurotypical, that might be something you want to call out,
Yeah.
especially if you're not asking for an accommodation and you're making that point. It's going to carry more weight. Do you hear the way people might talk about other people, and you stop those conversations and you go, we don't talk about people that way? A bee in my bonnet is when we use language to describe kids and it's who the kid is. Oh, that kid is loud, that kid is distracting, that kid is so behavioral. No, that kid isn't those things. That child is having trouble regulating their volume. That child is struggling to stay focused. And if you are an educator and you work at our workplace, I insist even further that you make the onus on you, right? I'm having trouble engaging that child.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble giving that child the cues that they're talking too loud. It's on you and not them. I once had someone say, oh, well, I know, but I'm just having a conversation with you. And I said, language matters. The way you talk about a child frames the way you think about a child. So whether neurodiversity touches your life, if you ask the people in your life to talk about children in a certain way, it really has impact. One of the things that I know, we have a lot of champions in our community who've come to me and talked to me. They've attended one of our workshops. They've learned more about what they've done. And we have a lot of allies who are educators and have said, I've started attacking some of the conversations at our work and saying, no, we're not going to talk about the kids that way. And that is subtle advocacy. And this is what we're trying to focus on this week. I don't think any parent of a neurodiverse child really has the time, energy to completely advocate for massive social change. But the small things we do have impact, and letting organizations like ours and others do some of that bigger advocacy. It doesn't mean that the things you do in your everyday life don't have impact. These small things actually matter. For example, I once got my hair cut and I shared that I was autistic, and she let me pick my cape.
Yeah.
And it almost brought me to tears. I was actually choked back because so much of my life is me having to advocate or putting up with something that I don't like.
Yeah, I think that's like something so small as picking your own cape. It's like truly can change the outcome of the entire situation. Because I remember you sharing that story with us, and you were saying how like you always had difficulties finding like a place to go and get your hair cut and stuff like that, or it was always like a situation would happen where, you know, it just wasn't the best fit for you. And if you at home listening can take anything from this podcast, I think it's something just as simple as that, giving choices, kind of challenging the normal of what's been going on, whether it be at work or at home, or just really working with someone who is neurodiverse in your life on what they need.
And being
Yeah.
a little selfish, a great way of doing advocacy, a fantastic way to do advocacy, is to engage with our social media.
Yes.
Look, I gotta fit the plug in. I'm the
Yes.
ED. I've got to think of the whole organization, but it is true. Sometimes there may be people in your life who are neurodiverse who haven't disclosed that to you, but they start to see that you're supporting CDL's work or that you're commenting
Yeah.
on it. And you, in a small way, are communicating that you are a safe space. And so if you're sitting there being like, yeah, I want people to feel safer, I want to build inclusion, how can I do it? That's just a small way. And let's be real, if you're watching this podcast, you probably have spent hours scrolling on your phone.
Yeah.
I know I have. So interact with us, and it supports our organization, but it does have that added benefit of someone understanding that you are a safe person. Because sometimes what happens to people who watch our content is because they are so pro neurodiversity that their algorithm tends to show them a lot of pro neurodiversity things.
Yeah.
And it becomes harder to believe that the shame and stigma still exists. It just happened to me last week. Just last week, again, I had an instance where someone was like, oh, I would have never guessed you're autistic, which happens a lot. But then she added, good for you. And my heart literally broke. She was praising my ability to mask. And like, very nice person, like lovely person who actually has a child who is neurodiverse.
Yeah.
And part of that, I understand, comes from the fact that her child isn't able to mask in the same way I am. And she looks at that and probably had a moment of wishing her child could, because as difficult personally as masking is, and it absolutely is difficult, watch our podcast. I talk very
Yes, we have a
openly
whole
about that.
episode, yeah.
There are a lot of benefits to being able to mask. When I have a day where I am not able to mask, it's more difficult for
Yeah.
everyone, especially if it happens when I'm at work. Like, and everyone is so lovely about it, but there have been days where I'm like, the meeting literally will go in 12 directions, and I have to be like, I'm sorry, okay. Yes, I'm looking
Yeah.
at the agenda. I will have to put the agenda like right in front of me to go topic to topic, because some days
Yeah.
my brain will be all over the place. And luckily I work at CDL, where obviously everyone understands, but there's the vast majority, I mean, I know how many employees we have. The vast majority of people do not work at CDL.
Yes.
And don't have that experience. So we need to be making sure we're just doing that little bit of advocacy, and we're letting people know that we're safe people.
Yeah, and to kind of wrap up our symposium this upcoming week, we have some really fantastic sessions that I'm really excited for. on March 24th. So if you're watching this episode on Monday, the 23rd, tomorrow night you'll have a session with Tim Hewitson, who we are lucky enough to call one of our own. He is a tutor here at CDL, and his session is going to be all about AI in education. I love any sort of workshop, anything to do with how to kind of use AI as the tool that it was created to be. And I'm just really excited for him to kind of dive in. He is super passionate about using AI to better help learning, especially with neurodiverse students. So I'm really excited about that. On March 25th, we have Ariella, who's doing empowering neurodiverse individuals in the workplace. We talk about a lot of neurodiverse empowerment in the workplace on our podcast, and I'm very excited to have someone who is so skilled in that area to come and do a workshop with us. She is going to be talking about that from the point of view of the neurodiverse individual. So I'm excited to kind of give a little spin on that. On March 26th, we have Emily Sheevers, who is also another educator at CDL. She is part of our social emotional programming. And her session is going to be the sensory toolbox, building sensory support for everyday life, which I'm also excited for. I know she has a jam-packed resource kit to hand out to parents and caregivers for that session. So I am super excited for you guys to attend these sessions this week.
So this is our final podcast of our symposium. I really hope that our intention for this symposium is what happened. Thank you so much for watching. If you're not watching this at the time we're releasing it and you think, oh no, I've missed the symposium. No, you can still buy a ticket to get access to all of the recordings. I think we'll keep the tickets open for the next 6 months in case people encounter this on our social media way after the date, so that you can buy the ticket, access the recordings, and learn more about the work we do. Thank you for standing together with us, and let's build a more inclusive community.
Thank you for listening to the Neurodiverse Lens, a CDL podcast. For more information, visit diverselearners.ca.